Today, I'm going to show you the hottest comps in 14.17, hotter than opening your car door in the summer. And let's just get right into it at the very top in the S tier. So we have Spider Queen Elise. This is by far the best hero augment. Maybe we even put it in a tier on its own because it's averaging a 3.64, which is pretty much unheard of. You could go back into as many patches as you can, find an augment that averaged 3.64 or better. It's going to be pretty hard. But it turns out if you have an augment that's strong already and then you buff the trait that it plays around, this time it was Shapeshifters, it's going to be pretty good. I didn't expect it to be this good, but yeah, this is S++, auto take this and just hard force your Elise. Luckily, the other hero augments are still strong, but not as good. High horsepower Lillia and Witchy Wallop Poppy both work in the Ahri Zoe comp, but these two augments are doing fine just on their own. High horsepower at 4.01, and then Witchy Wallop is like a 4 point low something as well, like yeah, 4.14, pretty much the same thing. Zap Attack Blitzcrank coming in next. This one's nice because it doesn't fight for the Ahris and Zoes. You go for Kogmaw or Veigar depending on what items you have and what champions you're hitting. Portal Ryze is going to be the best 4-cost comp, but it does rely on emblems. If you haven't noticed yet, this patch is really requirement heavy. You either require an augment or you require an emblem. Luckily, there's the different version of Ryze. In the Arcana Ryze, that's going to be the most popular one right now. You could also do 4 Scholar, Horizontal Kalista. That's another no requirement comp, but apart from these two, you're going to need something big in your game to go for a certain comp. Ashe Jax Reroll is going to be a new comp, and this one is really fun because if you like rerolling 1 cost, this is going to be for you, so I expect a lot of people to play this. But of course, we'll cover this comp along with all the other comps you see here after we go through the summary. We're going to round out the S tier with Shapeshifter Flex. This is probably one of my favorite comps so far. Since they buff Shapeshifters a lot and Briar got like giga buffs, if you ever get a Shapeshifter emblem or you get an early Briar, Shapeshifters are a really easy way to play the game because you just play 6 Shapeshifter or 8, use them as tanks, and then you use any sort of DPS unit and you're going to be more than good to go. Next up in the A tier, we have Kogmaw. Classic reroll comp, this time with 2 costs. Karma Gwen Fiora is making a comeback. This one's actually a super good comp, but it needs a lot of items. Reroll Veigar, still pretty solid. Katarina Reroll, still solid as well. Spin to win Wukong, really good in all those Jinx reroll builds. It is a bit expensive, but it is well worth the effort. Warwick Reroll, if you get Corrupted Scepter, you pretty much don't want to play it without it. If you don't believe me, 3-star Warwick's averaging a 4.22, but with the Scepter, it's a 3.3. So imagine all those games where you don't have the Scepter. It's probably averaging above a 4.5, which obviously is below average. But this one's super heavy requirement. Like, it would be S++ tier, but it's so hard to get one specific artifact item. It's even more difficult than getting a hero augment, more difficult than getting a specific emblem. So you're not going to be playing this in too many games. Sweet Tooth Nunu, pretty solid hero augment. Same thing with the Zap Attack Blitzcrank. Sugarcraft, solid if you get the emblem early. Frost, Pyro, Olaf, and Pyro Varus. This comp dropped down a little bit. It's going to be in the lower parts of the A tier. It's still playable. Varus is still okay, but it's never your first pick. If you're going to go an AD comp, you'd rather go for a Kalista build. Trust me, everyone knows this. I've been saying it for a while. Frost Pyro has been my favorite comp for the past couple of patches, not because it was good, but because I like the champions. And I think they've reached the point where you're not trying to go for them anymore. Built different. It's seen better days, but it's still okay. Molten Caramel Rumble. This one, if you have good items for it, go for it. Deja Vu Galio, same thing. These two are good if you have the perfect items, but I notice a lot of people take both of these augments and then they don't build a single item on that unit until like stage 4 or something like that. I know they're not doing it on purpose, but it just means that those players are going for them at the wrong times. Multistriker Kalista, they're better Kalista builds, so I'd probably put this one in the back burner, but it's still a solid option if you get a +1 Multistriker emblem and you happen to be trying to play Kalista. Next up in the B tier, Witchcraft Fiora Karma is going to stay down here. The Witchcraft trait just isn't that great. I think the Nasus nerfs brought it down a little bit, so even though the Flex Karma Gwen Fiora build's doing pretty solidly, Witchcraft Fiora Karma, even if you get a Witchcraft spat, it's not the greatest thing in the world, but it is if you get to 8 Witchcraft, but that's really difficult to do. But 6 Witchcraft, not enough. Faerie Kalista, they buffed 6 Faerie a bunch, so I actually thought this would be a comp, but it just isn't. I saw some people try it on the first day of the patch, but afterwards, nothing else really happened because people stopped playing it because they realized it's not that great. By the way, there was a B patch recently, but it was there just to fix bugs. It doesn't really affect the meta that much, but if we look at some of the trait stats, we just type in Faerie here, like you see it right here. 6 Faerie is a 4.65. that assumes you also hit a lot of the units. So it's probably even worse than this if you go for the comp, because even reaching a 6 trait assumes you hit like Kalista already. So imagine the games where you don't. It's not looking too good for this comp. Obviously 9 Faerie is good, but that's really hard to reach. So I'm not even counting that in this little data check here. So that's why I didn't even bother making the comp for it yet. Maybe after one more buff, it'll be good to go. Multistriker Kassadin, it's okay. I would say there are better things to go for, like the Ashe Jax Reroll with Multistrikers, but Hecarim did get buffed. I expect to see some Kassadin Hecarim builds later on. Maybe I should preemptively move this to the A tier, but essentially Hecarim's really good. It's just hard to play him because he's the only unit that's a 3-cost Multistriker. So it's kind of hard to pair him up with other things. The only other 3-cost unit you can play is going to be Shen. He fits in all the Multistriker boards, but 3-star Shen doesn't do anything. I saw this hilarious meme about Shen. My favorite one was they call him 007, 0 regards to lore, 0 carry potential, and 7 seconds till he dies. Like, yeah, even at 3-star, he still dies in 7 seconds. Like, I've seen that happen too many times. Actually, I haven't seen that too many times, but I did it in the first patch, and I saw other people do it in the first patch a bunch because no one knew how to play back then. And yeah, he died in 7 seconds, so no one's built him 3-star ever since. Eldritch Mages. Eldritch is kind of struggling right now. Even with the Nami buffs, like, she's used in too many other comps that it's kind of gets stolen. But if you get School Mascot or +1 Eldritch, it is viable to go for like 7 Eldritch, especially since Briar did get buffed. But it's not something you aim for from the beginning of the game. If you compare this to like Portal Spatula with Ryze, it blows it out of the water. 2 tanky Blaster. Ezreal and Hui still suck. Don't play this. Fast 9ing. I should actually move this up a bit. I'm gonna move it to the top of the B tier. I think it's on the cusp because a lot of legendaries did get buffed. If the leveling tempo kind of changes a little bit, we could see Fast 9ing be really good on this patch. Blaster Vanguard, like, don't play Hui. Akali Nyla dropped down a lot. The units just kind of get outshined, and like all the Katarina players are taking your units. Almost everyone plays Akali in some comp because she's a triple trait unit. And then Syndra Cassiopeia, a lot of people have been trying this build, but unfortunately, it's just not up to snuff yet. 3-star Cassiopeia just falls off really, really hard. And then in the C tier, yeah, don't play this. I made a post recently about Namzi Twitch reroll, and even though they buffed Namzi a lot, it's really not worth playing. So like the biggest baits of this patch is going to be 6 Faerie Kalista, which we went over already. If we look at Namzi and Twitch, 4.61 and 4.78 as a 3-star. So that means you hit it as a 3-star and then you're still going below average. That sounds pretty awful, right? Ziggs, he's really only played as a 2-star unit. Sometimes he is 3-starred, but he's never like the main star of the show. Another big part of the patch, I think like Shyvana got buffed a little bit. Probably no Shyvana comps to play around yet. And Nasus got nerfed a bit, but Nasus is still fine. I mean, if you need a shapeshifter tank, he's going to be your guy. I know it's 4.54, but the play rate's 2.39, which is really high. It means that a lot of players are going for Nasus, so you expect the average placement to be a bit lower because of that. But I'd say the only changes that made a comp actually good, probably going to be shapeshifters and multi-strikers. But let's get into how to play each and every one of these comps. We're going to start off with Spider Queen Elise. Really easy to play. Don't have to say too much about this. I mean, just get the Spider Queen augment, do a 1-cost reroll, like don't level up, follow the leveling pattern. If you aren't familiar with that, check out my video on leveling. It's in the description below. And then get your Elise 3. The only like really good item I'd say on Elise is Bloodthirster. Like, yeah, you also want Archangels plus Warmogs, but I'd say just getting like 2 of these 3 items is good enough. Like, there are a lot of items you could build, such as like regular tank items, AP items, like Crown Guard's really good too. There's a lot you could build on Elise. If you ever are confused and you're like, hey, this guy forgot to put everything, just type in like Elise here and then check out the items. Like, you could see a bunch of them down here. But pretty simple comp. You just level up, play in all the shapeshifters, and then find some sort of backline carry. Oftentimes people use Blaster with this because you get Pyro for free from Nasus and Varus, and you also get Dragon for free from Shyvana and Smolder. You could also even do Eldritch when you manage to get a Briar. You just replace your Jace most of the time if he's 2-star. And then you could run stuff like Nami, which is really good. But you could read the full write-up on bunnymuffins.lol/meta, where we update the meta snapshot every single Friday. Next up we have is Ahri Reroll. This comp did get nerfed a bit, but it's still very, very strong. Probably like the best reroll comp that doesn't have a hero augment. And it's the same thing as before. You go either Bastions or Vanguard. You pretty much always go for 4 Scholar, and then you itemize whoever you have 3-starred. Like, sometimes you get Zoe 3, sometimes you don't. If you don't, do not itemize her. Put it on Ryze instead for leftover items, but focus on your Ahri, Focus on whoever your main tank is, Lillia or Poppy, Galio or Rumble. Could even be Mordekaiser in some cases, like Mordekaiser 3. I think he's probably the best tank in terms of like for his price, but he's often difficult to get since you're doing a 2-cost reroll. It's hard to get 3-star 2-cost and 3-cost at the same time. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's much easier to get Rumble, Galio, and Ahri together. But heavy reroll augments are really good in this comp. I have the augments listed out on the right-hand side. Getting perfect item Ahri does mean something. The double adaptive helm build is absolutely disgusting. And then you just want to make sure you have magic penetration with either an Ionic Spark in the front line or a Static Shiv in the back. Figure out what tanks you're naturaling because you're going to be flexing between these two builds. Maybe you even get the high horsepower Lillia or the Witchy Wallop Poppy augment, in which case you could do the same exact thing, just with a little bit more power. And then after that, the comp pretty much plays itself. Next one up we have is going to be Zap Attack Blitzcrank, another 1-cost reroll. We have 2 versions here. One was Ziggs. Like, Ziggs is pretty good. If you can't afford Veigar because he's a 3-cost unit, go 3-star Ziggs and 3-star Blitzcrank. Ziggs actually does do some work now. Blue buff plus 2 AP items is more than enough, and then Blitzcrank in the front with the Ionic Spark. They're going to be working together better than peanut butter and jelly. So after that, let's go over the Kogmaw version. This one's just Kogmaw reroll, but you have a Blitzcrank augment. So you're going to be doing physical damage a lot, so you don't need the Ionic Spark. Just focus on like 3 big tank items on Blitzcrank, and then just do the regular Kogmaw build in the back. Last Whisper, Shojin, Infinity Edge on Kogmaw, and then Rageblade on Tristana with the Faerie Crown, and then some support items on Nunu if you get him 3-star. Not the end of the world if you don't get those. But really, it's just 1-cost reroll into 2 or 3 costs, depending on which carry you're going for. It's going to be mainly dictated by your items. First of all, I would only take Zap Attack augment if I have either a bunch of Blitzcranks with like semi-decent items, or I have very good items for Blitzcrank. So if I have like a Stone Plate already plus a component for something else like a Warmog's Crown Guard, Ionic Spark, Redemption, whatever it is, then yeah, I'd take it. But if not, you might want to skip this comp because it's not as good as the Spider Queen Elise comp. The Spider Queen Elise you pretty much auto take. Next one up we have is Portal Ryze. Extremely high cap. Ryze still destroys everything. His itemization is a bit weird because you want like anti-heal plus like raw AP. So getting like a red buff, it's like a 2-for-1 item. A lot of people like building Rageblade on Ryze. It's a really good item on him. But people also like building Morello on him. So what's an item that does both? Red buff. So that's going to be by far his best item, but it's a little bit difficult to build because oftentimes the bows are taken. After that, you want as many rods you could get your hands on because he loves building Hat, Archangels, Jeweled Gauntlet, anything that does that. You also need a rod if you want to build a Portal Spatula. You could use a rod for Ionic Sparks. So when you're playing this comp, you just want to be getting as many rods as you can. One thing that they did change in the B patch is that they fixed Ryze's interaction with Static Shiv, so expect to see a lot of red buff Rageblade Static Shiv builds on Ryze. It might actually be pretty decent. I personally loved having Static Shiv on Ryze before the bug occurred, so I think I might be bringing that build back. But this one, you just get the Portal Spat, you get to 8 Portal, and then you play around with some sort of flex extra unit. So you play Taric, Galio, Kassadin, Jace, Ryze, Zoe, and Ezreal. If you get Nora and Yuumi, you could replace either Kassadin or Ezreal. Either or, it doesn't really matter. So whoever you have 2-star, just keep that unit. And then drop a Portal Spat on whoever you're adding into your comp. All these units work. There are even 3-cost units that work. For example, Hecarim's pretty decent, Mordekaiser's decent, Swain, Nico, anything like that. Tanks really like the Portal emblem because it gives a big shield. And also the Portal comp doesn't run too many tanks. Like Taric is the main one, so he's pretty solid. But then like Galio's a 2-cost, Kassadin's a 2-cost, Jace is a 1-cost. So I like having some sort of tank line so that my Portal can throw more stuff out. And since you often build Rageblade on Ryze, you want to buy him as much time to get as many attack speed stacks, and then he goes ham after that. But next build up we have is the Ryze Flex build. Much weaker than the Portal build, but there are fewer requirements. You just need like Ryze stuff. And then people like going the 4 Arcana build or the 4 Scholar build. It really depends on what units you hit, but both builds are really flexible. You can play all sorts of different units. Like all the units you see on your board here, you don't have to play them. Like in the top version, if you have Tahm Kench, Ryze, Hecarim, Ahri, and Xerath, as long as you have 3 Portal, the rest of the units can be kind of pretty flexible. On the bottom picture here, if you have Taric, Ryze, Milio, Zoe, and Bard, the rest of the units can be pretty variable as well. So pretty much you're just playing whoever you have to play, and you generally go for this comp if you are pretty contested. You don't get a portal spat, and you just need to whip up some sort of like weird board to kind of just get you through the game. If you hit, great, but if you don't, it's not the end of the world either. All these like no requirement comps, I mean, like I write requirements here, but they're not like absolutely required, such as like up here. I'm gonna make a distinction between that in the future, but they're pretty much just like low risk, low reward. Next build up we have is Horizontal Kalista. Works in a very similar manner to the Ryze comp. You just get Fiora and Kalista 2-star, get some sort of tank up front, and you're good to go. 3 Multistriker is going to be the base, and then you really just need a Rageblade on Kalista. So if you're a big fan of slamming Rageblade at the start of last patch, it's going to work out beautifully for you because the Horizontal Kalista and the Ryze comp both work, and you could just share the items between them. You build the Rageblade, then you build some tank items, and then once you get more direction, you commit to one or the other. So if you commit to the Kalista build, you want to build some Fiora items. If you commit to the Ryze build, you want to build some Ryze item. But both of them are standard leveling, so you just want to get to level 8 as safely as possible, and then kind of just flex the front line because you don't need preservers as shown here. You could do like Bastions, you could do like the Arcana combo with like Tom Kench plus Hecarim, and then you add in a Vanguard plus Bastion, maybe some random legendary to complement them too. Like there's so many different things you could kind of do. Both these comps are like pretty difficult, so that's kind of the risk you take. So you could either play like the easy comps such as the Portal Ryze comp, or Zap Attack Blitzcrank, and you have a lot of direction. They're really easy to play, but you have some sort of requirement before you go for them. But if you play the flex comps, it's going to be a bit harder, but you could play it in a lot more situations. So I guess that's where kind of like more skill comes into play, but I would kind of avoid the harder to play comps if you're not too comfortable with them. Ashe Jax Reroll. This is one of the new comps we have in the tier list right now. It's really, really powerful. It's just a 7 Multistriker build, which means you really want a +1 Multistriker emblem or have press the attack. In the early game, Ashe 3 and Jax 3 completely carry everything. So in stage 3 and 4, if you have them 3-star, like you'll pretty much win every round. After that, they do fall off a bit until you get 7 Multistriker. It's hard to get Camille because you spent a lot of gold in the early game, so getting to level 9, almost impossible. Getting to level 8 does not guarantee getting a Camille, so that's pretty much why you really want to play it with the Multistriker emblem. In case you're wondering what comps like emblems and what comps do not like emblems, if you ever play a trait with more than 6 or more units, you generally want an emblem. If it's less than that, you don't really need it. But the reason why it works that way is because when you go really deep into a trait, you often play low-cost units, and you don't want to play low-cost units in the late game unless you re-roll them like you have with the Jax and the Ashe here. But even in this comp, in the late game, like, do you really care about Kassadin or like Akali? Like, they're not doing too much, right? Akali's obviously giving you Pyro, but Kassadin's kind of doing nothing. So if you had an emblem, you could replace him with literally any other unit in the game, or you don't have to hit a legendary, which saves you a ton of gold because Camille is really hard to find. But this one's just 1-cost reroll. Items for Ashe is going to be red buff, going to be her best item. Runons after that, and then people like Rageblade on her. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I feel like you get enough attack speed from 7 Multistriker, but the third item slot literally doesn't matter. It could be like a Giant Slayer, Deathblade, Infinity Edge, anything you could think of that gives Ashe more damage. They're going to be pretty much the same. Jax items, on the other hand, are a bit weird. So Jax is tanky, but he's not as tanky as, let's say, Nasus. So on Nasus, you normally build him with like pure tank items like Stoneplate, Warmogs, Redemption, but on your Jax, you build a bit differently. You build a lot of the what I call early fight tank items. So that's going to be stuff like Crown Guard because it gives a shield at the beginning of the fight, Even Shroud. A lot of people don't know this, but it does give the armor reduction, but it also gives you bonus armor and magic resist for the first 10 seconds of combat. Stuff like Vow is decent to give you a nice shield at the beginning. So like anything that gives him a boost at the beginning of the fight, going to be more than welcome on Jax because he's not going to go infinite like Nasus will. You sort of blitz them down, except you're a tank, so you don't really blitz them, but you kind of like get blitzed. I don't know how to say it. You just want early fight items on him. But some augments that work really good on this, other than the Multistriker augments, are going to be any reroll augments. So Prismatic Ticket, really powerful. Pandora's Bench, Silver Ticket. Or if you want something completely different, Category 5 is insane on Ashe. And then Anger Issues, also really good in this comp. But let's move on into the next build. We have the Shapeshifter Flex build. So this is my favorite comp of the patch. If you get a Shapeshifter emblem, great. If not, not the end of the world. Early Briar is really good, but not required. You just really need 6 Shapeshifter, and it's going to be pretty solid if you have decent augments. Like even non-Shapeshifter augments are good. Anything that makes them more tanky is going to be great. So Giant and Mighty is really good. Immovable Object incredible. That one's probably my favorite one because Shapeshifters get so much health, and the Randuin's Omen that you get gives so much armor and MR to your team that your effective HP just goes through the roof. Martyr, very solid, and then like Exiles, Ascension, these work really well with Shapeshifters because you build a lot of health on them and they're pretty durable, so you get the Ascension proc. Obviously, Exiles isn't like the absolute perfect augment for them because they get a lot of bonus HP after they transform, and Exiles does not take that into account, but it's still really good because you get a crap ton of bonus health anyways. But this build plays very similarly to the Elise build in terms of the units you play, not in terms of rolling. You do standard leveling, but for the units, it's the same comp, but you rely more on your backline carry. So that's going to be like your Varus in the mid game, and then Smolder in the late game, and Briar in the late game as well. Briar 1 is more than good enough to service your team. She just jumps in, AoE fears everyone, and then slowly kills people. I don't know what it is. Like, I played Briar and she just doesn't die, infinite heals with the Bloodthirster, and does a crap load of damage, and complement that with a Smolder, ramping up with the Rage Blade. This team comp wins a lot of fights. So when should you go for this comp? If you get any of the Shapeshifter augments, yeah, go for it. They're not averaging that well right now, but if you have a good Shapeshifter start, they are usable. If we look at Eternal Growth, also not that great, but if you have the units, it doesn't really matter. I think people are overgoing those augments because the trait got buffed, but they forget that when you take them, you need to have the units to back it up with. If you look at the trait stats, 8 Shapeshifter, obviously really good, but 6 is also pretty decent at a 4.26, considering there's pretty much like no requirement for it. You don't need to hit Briar to get to 6, and you don't need the emblem to hit it either. It's probably just because Nasus is really, really good. It's also getting bumped up by the Spider Queen Elise stats, but this comp is still really, really solid. Pretty much, instead of having the Spider Queen Elise carry you, if you get a 1-star Briar, you're going to be good to go, but it doesn't happen every game. So if you get a good early game, you're going to be able to streak and save a lot of HP, and then what you want to do is go fast 9. I talk about it more down here, where you have to figure out where you want to roll, either level 8 or level 9. Essentially, if you're healthy, you want to go 9, get a 1-star copy of Briar, and then Briar will carry. One other thing you could do is that a lot of people don't know this. Bloodthirster and Sterix are actually like pseudo tank items, and they work really well on all the Shapeshifters. So if you're ever afraid of slamming Bloodthirster and Sterix and Titans, don't be when you're playing Shapeshifters, because I've seen Sterix gauge Nasus carry, I've seen Sterix gauge Swain carry, I've seen BT Swain carry. Not in terms of damage, but in terms of tankiness. So as long as you have something in the backline doing something, oftentimes people do a Namzi plus Shyvana combo where they burn everything down while your Shapeshifters tank everything. It'll be fine. Like, obviously it's not ideal, but don't be afraid to build these items early game and put them on one of your tanks in the front line. Of course, you could always pivot into a different build when you build those items, like the Warrior comp's really good, but that's pretty much it for that. Kogmaw Jinx Hunter reroll, very solid comp. We have the Wukong version up here. If you get spin to win, or if you get a lot of stone plates, this is worth going for. Best items for Jinx right now is going to be Rageblade and Runons. Those two are required. Third item doesn't really matter as much. Kogmaw going to be the main focus of the other two builds though. Spear of Shojin, Last Whisper, Infinity Edge, like pretty much anything works on him. Kind of depends what you're trying to do, but you just need some sort of front line. So this comp up here, it has the Wukong. Over here, it's got the Nunu, Rumble, and sometimes people use the Zap Attack Blitzcrank, as we talked about before. The bottom version is going to be the 4 Hunter version. If you get an early Olaf with Olaf items, go for it, because sometimes that randomly happens, so that's another viable out that you kind of have. But 2-cost reroll for the most part, you just go for Kogmaw and Nunu 3. Sometimes you pick up Rumble if you have enough items. Putting like a Thieves Glove on Rumble is really good, but it's a pretty easy comp to play just because it's a 2-cost reroll build. After that, we have is Flex, Karma, Fiora, Gwen. Nothing's changed since the previous time you played this, other than it's strong again now. Gwen is really, really good with mana regeneration items, so if you ever get like a blue buff, it's absolutely nasty on Gwen. I need to update the image a little bit, but if you get a blue buff, you're often putting it on your Karma, so that's one thing you kind of have to fight over. But it makes the comp more flexible, because let's say you build a blue buff early, you put it on your Ziggs, Ziggs got buffed, right? I'm just going to assume that happens. As you approach your level 8 roll down, whoever you get, Karma or Gwen, can use those items. Because you know how sometimes before we relied a lot on Karma, and we'd have like 2-star Gwen, 2-star Fiora, 1-star Karma. We'd have 3 items on Karma and none on anyone else. And you'd still win the game because back in that patch, Karma was completely bonkers. But nowadays, that doesn't have to be the case because they're pretty equal. But now, whoever you 2-star, that's who you put the blue buff on, Gwen or Karma. So it essentially makes the comp a lot easier to play. After that, for the front line, Fiora just likes the same items she's always like BT, Sterex, and then any third item works. Edge of Night, Infinity Edge, Titan's Resolve, like literally anything. Gwen, any AP, Bruiser frontline item works, and then Karma, Morello, red buff, blue buff, any AP or Nashers. And then you complement these 3 units with a bunch of Preservers. Then they slowly whittle everything down because you have like 3 AoE champions doing a lot of damage. But one thing you want with this comp is a lot of items, so either get a Thieves Glove at the beginning of the game, throw it on someone. Fiora is probably the best holder of it in my opinion. But you essentially want to make sure like all 3 of these units have enough items to go around. So if you don't have a Thieves Gloves, you have to have like Buried Treasures, maybe like Item Grab Bag, or you get one of those portals which give you extra items such as like Completed Anvil and things like that. But this used to be one of my most played comps. I'm probably going to go back to it a bunch. I miss building blue buff and then just going whatever. So hopefully that should be pretty fun. Next comp up we have is Reroll Veigar. Very expensive build, very hit or miss. You go for Vex 3, Veigar 3. Like only do this if you get huge econ in the early game and good items for them. Because Veigar with these 3 items, blue buff, Nashers, and Spear of Shojin, everyone who's built this before knows exactly what I'm talking about. Let me know in the comments down below if you have. He just keeps casting throughout the entirety of the fight, and it's really funny to see. He also happens to deal a lot of damage when he does that. So at the very least, get blue buff plus Nashers. Third item can be anything, but the Shojin's hilarious to watch. On your Nami, some mana items good, so blue buff, Spear of Shojin, or Adaptive Helm. Then a Morello or red buff. Makes her one of the greatest support units ever in this comp. And then for Vex, these 3 items are the most popular, but the only mandatory one I'd say would be the Ionic Spark, because you need some sort of magic resist shredding. But the other 2 tank items could kind of be any tank item, but these just work the best on Vex because of the way her abilities work. Stoneplate is good because she loves being isolated in the front. Crown Guard's good because she's a mage, so she likes AP. But really expensive comp because you have to get 2 3-cost 3-stars, so yeah, don't go for this comp that often. I think it's overplayed before. Probably still overplayed now. Next one up we have is Katarina Reroll. Despite needing a 3-cost 3-star, I like actually playing the 4-cost version a bit more, where you just go Fiora and Gwen. If you hit the Katarina, great. If you don't, who cares? You still have 2-star Fiora, 2-star Gwen. And you could flex between this build and the Preserver build over here, because you play a lot of the same units. If you get a 2-star Karma, just like ditch your Katarina, throw your Katarina AP items onto your Karma, and don't look back. Vice versa too, right? If you're playing the Karma comp and you get like Gwen and Fiora, and you also see a lot of Katarinas for some reason, but no Karmas, like you could switch to this comp too. You just need to add in the Akali or the Nyla to get to 4 Warrior. You're also sharing all the Preserver units, so like Rakan and Bard, so that's pretty easy to kind of mix and match. So if you ever play for Fiora and Gwen, just know that you could flex between the Katarina and the Karma as well. Do I prefer the Karma version? I do, because I don't like relying on 3-star 3-costs. They're just really expensive to hit right now due to the charm mechanic, but those 1 out of 5 games or 1 out of 3 games where it is viable, you have to know when to go for it, because that's ultimately what gets you that like extra 10 LP every 5 games, right? And then you climb over time. But this comp's really easy to play. The only trick to it is you want to slam all your items early, because warriors are not item dependent. They could pretty much play anything, like any AD carry or frontline bruiser item works on Fiora. Any AP carry or frontline AP items work on Gwen. Katarina just needs like a healing item, and she gets a Crown Guard, so you really only need 2 items on her. And like worst case, you have some tank items, throw them on like Nasus. Who cares, right? Like, but ideally you're focusing on the warriors there because they're going to be the main carries of your comp. Spin to win Wukong. This is pretty much the same exact thing as the Preserver comp we saw above, or the 4 Hunter comp. A lot of people do the 4 Hunter version. Again, the only really required items is having like Runon's Rageblade on Jinx. Third item doesn't really matter. On Wukong, Stoneplate's his best item if he does not have spin to win. If he does, people like adding in a Bloodthirster plus Asterix. But if you have 3 Stoneplates, you could still play it. It's still really, really good. Next build up we have is going to be Corrupt Vampiric Scepter Warwick. It's one of the highest averaging combos in the game, as we saw before in the data check. Like Corrupted Scepter plus Warwick is like 3.8 or something crazy like that, but it's hard to get, so play this sparingly. Do not force this hoping you get a Corrupted Vampiric Scepter later in the game, because without it, I think it averages like a 4.6 3-star Warwick. So there are definitely better things to kind of go for, but I like playing it with 7 Frost. Some people like going for the Vanguards, but both versions work. It depends what units you're hitting. If you're hitting a bunch of the Frost units, like, or you get a Frost Emblem, go for it. If you get Frosty Frontline, same thing. But if you get a bunch of the Vanguard ones, like, why not? Just switch your build over to that. Items for Warwick. I like having Quicksilver, and then third item, either Titans or Rageblade. Some people like doing full damage. They go like Corrupted Scepter and then double Rageblade. In my opinion, it really doesn't matter what you build, as long as you have the Corrupted Scepter. I would just build any buildable item on him and use that to save life. But just do 1 cost reroll for this. If you pick up Twitch, great. If not, who cares? You have other units you could kind of use to secondary carry. Next one up, we have a Sweet Tooth Nunu. People like combining this with Veigar the most. You could build like an Ionic Spark on him if you want. If you do that, you could also do the Kogmaw build. Both are perfectly fine, but obviously you need the Sweet Tooth Augment and some tank items for Nunu at the start. Very simple to play. You just do 2 cost reroll. Don't really have to talk too much about this. Next one up, we have a Sugarcraft. If you get Sugarcraft emblem at the start of the game, I would go for this. Some people hard force this comp and like they get a spatula early, but they don't get specifically Sugarcraft spatula, and then they try to play into this. Like, you can do that, but I wouldn't. I'd really only play this if I get it at the very beginning to start stacking right away. But this comp works best on any item portal because Sugarcraft ramps up a lot faster when you have that. Also on games where you get like 5 components at the start, that's another reason to kind of go for this comp. But you just do Fiora, Gwen, carry. These two are just so good in this patch, so pretty much a lot of comps run these as flex units. Jinx, same items as before. You could add in Hunters if you manage to get her 3-star. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but pretty much every time you see a Sugarcraft unit, go for it. Like, if you're on Carousel and let's say you really need one item, just kidding, you don't really need that item, pick up whatever Sugarcraft you can instead. The reason why you want to do that is because 6 Sugarcraft is much stronger than 4 Sugarcraft, so you pretty much sack your game to kind of get there. Next comp up we have is Frostfire Varus. Yeah, I wouldn't really play this comp too much unless you have +1 Frost or Pyro, but it plays the same exact way as it does before. Tank items on Nasus, Shojin IE on Varus, Last Whisper also really good, and then Bruiser items on Olaf. Get either Frost or Pyro spat. That's what's really good about this. So if you do ever get a spatula, you don't have to like wait for one specific item. You could build either or, and then go deep into whatever trait that you hit. So if it's Pyro, put it on Olaf and then go more Pyro. You could even put it on Hui. And if it's Frost, put it on Varus. If you get another one, put it on Nasus, and then go deeper into Frost. Fast 8 for this, pretty simple to play. Pyro Varus, same thing. You go for 5 Pyro. That's with the emblem, and it did get nerfed, but it's still fine. Pyro Smolder is absolutely bonkers because attack speed is Smolder's favorite stat, and Pyro just gives a lot of that. Paired up with some Dragon, with Shyvana, Shapeshifters, you get that with Nasus. And it's pretty much the same thing. You could go for Blaster. Some people play that. Some people also go for the Frost version instead, though. A little dependent on getting Smolder. A different version you could kind of play is with Kalista. That's going to look a little something like this. So you'd play the Kalista, you get some multi-strikers. You already have a Kali in, right? So you could play like Camille, Hecarim, things like that. Hecarim's good because you don't need Diana. You get Bastion plus the multi-striker. You're not playing the Blasters anymore, so you could take these out. Just keep one in for the Varus. Doesn't have to be Hui, it could literally be anyone. And it looks something like this. You don't need the Shyvana, you could run like a Nico instead because Shyvana kind of sucks, right? Nico's a lot better. Nico like stuns people, so you get like a ton more utility. And also heals up your other tanks. But if you want to build out the full comp, you'd probably add in Rumble instead of Hui. Put him up front, get the Akali on the side somewhere, and then add in Tahm Kench. That gives you Vanguard, and it gives you Arcana. Pretty solid comp there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You could drop either Tahm Kench or Hecarim to make everything fit. But this is kind of like the budget version of the build, and then the build you see on the website is like the Jeff Bezos version, where it's a lot more expensive. Is Jeff Bezos even the richest man in the world anymore? He is not. It's apparently Elon. Depends when you check. Sometimes it's Bernard Arnault, so yeah. Whatever the case, like the rich person comp is going to look like this with a legendary. Next comp up we have is Built Different, 4-cost comp. I'd say the 4-costs are a lot more contested now, so it's a little more difficult to play. Well, not difficult, but a little bit worse to play. It's still fine, but it's not an auto take like it was before. Like before you used to like auto take Built Different. But I think now you only want to take it if you have a decent early game. So if you have a lot of random upgrades, like yeah, go for Built Different. But one interesting thing that you may notice is that if you go lower in rating, Built Different performs better. So depending on your rating, maybe it is auto take, but it gets worse as you get up. So just keep that in mind. But you pretty much just buy all the 4-costs, play duplicates, and go for 3-star 4-costs. Next up we have is Molten Caramel Rumble, hero augment that got nerfed a bit. It's okay, nothing crazy, but if you have a bunch of Rumbles at the start of the game or a bunch of Tristanas, I'd kind of go for this and get both of them to 3-star. But nothing too complicated here. Next one up we have is Deja Vu Galio. Only go for this if you have a lot of Rage Blades. If you don't even touch it, because it's really just not worth it otherwise. I've seen way too many replays of people playing this comp. They don't build their first Rage Blade till 4-1, and they lose so much health. And like, they have Galio 2 at the start of the game, and then they just can't get a Rage Blade until stage 4, and like, what are you doing, you know? So only do this if you have at least a Rage Blade at the start of the game, in my opinion, or if you get like 2-star Galio with 1 Rage Blade component, because it just really isn't worth it otherwise. You'll be really angry at the game afterwards if you don't get them. But luckily, like, you could fix it with like Pandora's items. It's a pretty good augment in this comp, just because you need all those specific items. But Galio 3 and then some sort of tank in the front line. It could be either Vex, Rumble, or Mordekaiser. Doesn't really matter who. Whoever's 3-star, that's who you're going to make your main tank and throw whatever items you can on them. So just build generic tank. You don't have to build anything specific there. Next one up we have is Multistriker Kalista. There's a better Kalista build, which is the horizontal Kalista build, but this one's still pretty solid. Like, any 7 Multistriker build right now is going to do well. Like, you could do Hecarim carry, you could do Kassadin carry, you could do Ashe Jax carry, and then you could also do Kalista carry. The only one you don't want to do is like probably Akali, right? But this is a great budget comp because it's really cheap. But again, you might want a +1 multi-striker to make hitting 7 multi-striker a lot easier. But you really only play 1 4 cost and 1 5 cost. Like, the Milio's just there for fun. It could be any Faerie instead. You're really just playing it to give the Faerie Queen crown to Kalista. So you're running Jax, you're running Ashe, Kassadin, Akali, like super cheap comp. So there used to be a portal which had no effect on the game, but if that still existed, this would be a pretty decent comp to go for. Next one up we have are the B tier. So Witchcraft Fiora Karma is kind of left in the dust right now. The other Fiora Karma Gwen comp is much better. I think I mentioned this before, but if you type in Witchcraft, like 6 Witchcraft is averaging a 4.75 right now, but like 8 Witchcraft, good. So if you can get 2 Witchcraft spatulas, yeah, go for it. But if you only have 1, probably not that worth it. It's still decent, right? You could go like 4 Witchcraft. I know it's 4.7, but you just play the comp you saw above, the Flex Fiora Gwen comp, and like this runs 3 out of 4 Witchcraft anyway, so then you get it for free. But that's really all you have to worry about. So there are better versions of this comp, but it's still playable, just not anything that crazy. But if you get to 8 Witchcraft, it's like pretty much first place. Next one up we have is going to be Multistriker Kassadin. Okay comp. It's better now because Hecarim got buffed, and sometimes you get 3-star Hecarim with the Kassadin. The issue is a lot of people are playing Arcana, so it's kind of hard to get 3-star Hecarim. So people are like griefing you unintentionally. They're just playing it because it's part of their comp, but they're not even going for Hecarim carry. But this comp's okay. They're just seen better days. Next one up, we have Eldritch Mages. Eldritch, I'd kind of stay away from for now, but if you get a great start with it, with an emblem, with school mascot, then like, yeah, sure, go for it. 2 tanky blaster. Wait till Ezreal and Hui get real buffs, and yeah, that's gonna be it for the comps here. Like Fast 9, I expect some version of Fast 9 to be viable, because again, a lot of the legendaries got buffed. There's got to be something you could do with like Briar and things like that, but it always depends on the tempo of the game. So some games you're allowed to Fast 9, some games you are not. But just to sum up at the top, Spider Queen Elise, S+++++++++. Everything else in the S tier, probably like up to here, is like S tier, and then you have like S- down here. All very solid comps to go for, but they either have heavy requirements, such as like Portal Ryze, or they're like kind of hard to play. The top of the A tier is really good, but you have to get a lot of units before you go for that comp. That's kind of how I would differentiate between the S and A tiers right now, and pretty much any other time you look at the tier list. So what am I going to do in this patch? Well, I'm going to pray to my Spider Queen, and hopefully I get this augment every single game. If not, I'm probably going to do the Rageblade stuff with Kalista and Ryze again. Then if I get a Portal Spat, I hard force Portal Ryze, but if not, I just go for one of these 2 comps with the Rageblade. Obviously, everyone has their own playstyle. I might also go for the Flex Fiora Gwen comp a lot. Maybe I build a blue buff at the start of the game and try to do that. But whatever you find comfortable, stick to that, because what I find comfortable might be different for you. It's like when you go to an ice cream shop. Watching this video is kind of like trying all those different samples that you can get. But then of course, people always have their go-tos. Some people like chocolate, pistachio, strawberry, whatever it is, right? So that's kind of how TFT works a little bit. If you want to like climb super hard, it's always best to stick to what you know. But if you are new to the game, I highly recommend checking out this beginner guide on the website over here. There's also a video for it on my channel. And then after that, check out the 100 tips to climb in set 12. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.